Um, my name is Misty. I'm one of the co-hosts. Mark is going to be hosting tonight. Mark, take it over.
Thanks, Mitzi. Listen, as per normal, welcome to everyone for coming and joining us tonight, our monthly meetings. We got obviously a very special night tonight. We're really looking forward to it. Yes. But first of all, I'd like to thank, Mitzi, Betty, and Laura, who are on the call that actually make this thing happen every week. I know it's fun for a lot of us that come into this, and we come in quite regularly. Tonight's sort of a special night for us. Our two guests are very interesting. Travis Walton is probably the most documented experiencer in modern times. I know that sounds like a daunting type of thing, Travis, but it sure seems that way from my whole life, and we'll get into that as we go along. And Jennifer Stein, who has put together a movie of Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, which we'll have some discussion on, and even some clips, I think, tonight that Jennifer's got for us tonight. So I welcome you, the two guests, and all our community here this October 11th, 2022. So let's get started, because we've got a pack. We have 2 hours, but usually it goes very quickly. So I just put together some things a little bit on Jennifer and Travis for some of you that may not know. Jennifer is a self-taught filmmaker. She's an entrepreneur. Started making films in the 90s while running a nonprofit organization. She's raised her 2 children and running a special events business. Her portfolio includes 9 movies, but the one that is the most relevant tonight, and not that the others aren't not relevant, but Travis Walton, the true story of Travis, is a multi-award winning film that I asked that all of you actually go and watch it. It's very, very interesting, very well put together. I watched it the other night. By the way, I did buy it too, by the way, Jennifer. So I can keep it and run with it the rest of my life. So that's good. She also has a website called onwingsproductions.com. So if you ever want to go to her story, she's involved with a function in Laughlin, Nevada. You want to talk a bit about that for a second?
Sure. I'll just mention November 11th, 12th, and 13th, I'll be speaking for Paula Harris at the Starworks conference, and that will happen live in Laughlin, and it won't be a masked event, and you don't need to show vaccination to go to, and it should be very good. I'll be speaking on an ancient site called Göbekli Tepe, which is in Turkey. So I won't be screening the film or talking about the Travis incident at all, but I'll be speaking there, and it's it's just nice for people to know about upcoming conferences.
Sure. Yeah, and is that also on Zoom, that conference? Can you actually tune in?
I don't know if Paula's doing that. She might, but her website is Starworks, and you can go Google her name or Google Starworks and find out and log on and possibly buy it on a virtual stream.
I've been to that conference, and it's very well put together, and they usually have a number of great hosts and guests that are in there. So that's a really worthwhile place to go if you really want to learn more and educate yourself more, and also meet more people. That's one of the things I found the best. Actually, that's where I met Travis. I met him at the UFO Congress. We had lunch a couple of times, Travis. I'm sure you probably had lunch with about 1,000 people, but it's we met during one of those periods where we watched you talk, and at that particular conference it's a great honor to have you on our show tonight. But let me just tell you a little bit about Travis for those of you that might not know, and I suspect most of you do. Travis, on November 5th, 1975, experienced one of the most high-profile abduction cases in mainstream media. A featured full-length movie was done by Hollywood called Fire in the Sky, if you ever want to tune in and watch that. One of the things that we'll get into tonight, and I want to talk with both you and Jennifer about the truisms between Jennifer's movie and the actual major film, Hollywood movie, to see where the differences are, and just to get an idea of how much they play with the storyline to attract people to fear or whatever the case may be, even though there probably was plenty of fear at the time, Travis, as you were going through this. So with no further ado, welcome to Jennifer and Travis to our monthly event. And we're very excited to have you both with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Travis, can you, just to start with, can you tell us a little bit about your experience, and did you ever believe in UFOs before this event even happened? Did you have any connection at all? Had you ever
Yeah, I
seen
think
any?
everybody's heard of the subject. I mean, who hasn't? That would be really strange if you found somebody, a UFO, what's that?
Yeah.
I really don't think you could find anybody that had never heard of UFOs.
Yeah. So would you say that you knew, you had an inkling that they're real, number one, because this idea of us being alone in the universe is quite a stretch at the best. But did you have an inkling that they were real? Is it something that you found interesting, or
Yeah,
was it
I
even a
thought,
topic?
well, you know, living in Arizona and living a very rural outdoor sort of life, you know, you see the sky at night a lot more than people who live in more polluted areas or in cities where there's a lot of competing lights.
Yes. I know Arizona is a fantastic place for lighting up the sky with stars, because they have a lot of no light neighborhoods that, you know, the Milky Way just sits there glistening in front of you. So I'd agree with that. Also, I've been into the northern parts of Arizona, and it's breathtaking. I spent a lot of time in Payson, Arizona. You know, it just absolutely breathtaking, beautiful skies, and yeah, I can imagine you see stuff up there once in a while, like we do here in Manitoba.
Mark,
yeah.
I'll interject if I can.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I think it's really amazing. Something I learned from Travis is that his brother Dwayne actually had a sighting about, was it a year before or 3 years before? It was rather low, close to the tree line.
Tic-tac shape.
Yeah, a tic-tac shaped craft.
Wow.
His brother saw. Was that 1972 or 73? Do you remember?
Something like that. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
So, yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, this, I think this whole issue is a lot bigger than, obviously, mainstream media doesn't really sort of focus. Lately, they've been putting out Tic Tacs and a few things, but they certainly aren't out banging the drums like we are, the people that believe and have had experiences ourselves. And by the way, Travis, I would say a mass majority of our 1,160 members have had some form of an experience one way or the other. And we'll get into some of that later. We start talking about some of the differences, and we may even get into a question and answer thing, if you're okay with that, later in the show here.
Yeah, well, my brother had, we were together at my mom's cabin out in the woods, and he came in a big hurry and looked very scared. And he was talking to my mom off to the side, but he didn't tell us at that time what it was that he was scared of.
Well, do you know if your family, any other members of your family, had any of those type of experiences, seeing what they thought were something unusual?
Yeah, I think my mom probably saw things in the sky, you know, sitting out there on the porch at the cabin over
Right.
the years.
And you've lived in the same area. Is it Snowflake or?
Yeah, I live in Snowflake. This whole area is referred to as the Mogollon Rim area. It's just a
Yes.
geological feature.
So I'd like to ask you a question about, how did the Paramount film come about? How did that all take place for you?
Well, they came to me. I didn't go looking for it. So
Yes.
it was, the screenwriter came around originally, wanted to talk to me, and he said he was working on a script and said that he'd like to get a movie made. And I didn't hear from him for a long time after that, but it took a couple of years. He finally put it together.
Did it come together fairly easily for you with regards to once the big conglomerate movie theaters or players come together. I guess it was Paramount, I suppose. Did that come together quickly? And I see you co-wrote the movie with them. Would that be accurate?
I don't know if that's accurate, but I was definitely a constant source of consultation.
Right.
But I didn't write anything.
You're mentioned on their. I went to their website and they actually have you as I think a co-writer of the movie. So it's kind of
okay. I'll mention that in my resume from now on. It's news to me.
Travis, you had written most of the book for the first book you'd written called The Travis Walton Story, and they based it on they based the script on your
probably
book.
where they got that from.
That's probably where that came from.
Yeah. So, how did you and Jennifer get together with regards to putting the Travis, the true story of Travis Walton together? Like, how did that take place?
Well, we both have, because of my experience, get invited to a lot of UFO conferences, and so I'd run into her at places like that before.
Okay.
So I met Travis in Roswell, New Mexico. I was helping to run and coordinate the Roswell conference in 2010 with Peter Robbins, who had been hired by the Mayor's Association to run a coordinating conference in association with the UFO Museums Conference. So there were two conferences happening that year. And I had dinner with Travis and Peter, and I think Ruben Uriarte was there, a couple of other MUFON people. And we basically said to Travis, your story is as significant as the Roswell story. And it's 20 years newer. Roswell was 47, yours was 75. It's many years later, 25 years later. Maybe you should think about hosting a conference up in Heber or Snowflake, because the Roswell Museum and the Roswell conferences have put Roswell on the map economically for that area. And it's really become quite significant. And we suggested that Travis think about that for the Heber area or the Snowflake area. And in discussions, we came about with the idea of doing a film, actually running a conference up there and then doing a film in conjunction with a conference. And then my efforts became more focused on really actually making a quality film rather than running a conference. I was turning that over to Travis and some other people, but that's kind of how it started in 2010. And by 2015, we had a film, but it took about 5 years.
Yeah, that's
Jennifer's film was done at the real location, unlike most everything else. Right. Even the movie was done in Oregon forest rather than Arizona forest.
Interesting. They never had any interest in filming in the actual area itself?
No, they didn't. And it's probably just as well, because there had been a couple of forest fires come through there, radically changing the look of the place.
Right. So Jennifer, in your website, you talk about harnessing the power of moving visual images to educate, inspire, and empower people. So what is your background in UFOs? And I mean, you've done 9 movies, not all were on UFOs. Tell me your background in this genre.
Well, I had my own sighting, actually, a pretty profound one of a craft at about 500 feet distance. And it was a rectangle of white light. And it was in September of 1975. And I lived in Philadelphia, or in the suburbs of Philadelphia, with my parents. I was 19 years old at the time. And so I had my own major UFO sighting, which I kind of had to just put in a gray box for a while, because I thought I was the only one seeing it. And I wasn't sure it wasn't a dream. It was early in the morning kind of thing, before it was light out, it was dawn. And 25 years later, when I was about 40, right around 40, turning 45, I realized someone else saw the same experience I did at the same time. in the house, who was in the house. It was another friend of mine who was staying at the house. And that's when I decided to get involved in MUFON and start hosting conferences. And I formed Mainline MUFON, which was a group I ran in Philadelphia for 20 years. And I started hosting programs. And I'd already been an event coordinator and I'd already started doing documentary film work, more out of necessity, because I was running charities and we couldn't afford to hire somebody to make the films. So I made the films for some various charities. I had an event coordination business. I did films of events as well. So one thing sort of led to another. And by the time I met Travis, I was quite primed, quite educated on the subject, and really felt like Hollywood should have done a real documentary. At some point, somebody should have stepped up and done a real quality documentary about this story. And I had already done a couple documentaries, and it really was like this challenge awaiting me. And I kind of thought, gee, could I do that? Could I make this film? And I wasn't quite sure I could, but I was determined to do a decent job, and I surprised myself. But I had a lot of help. I relied and pulled the resources I had and asked people to help me because I knew it had to be better than what I could do myself alone. And so that's how the film kind of came about. But, and that's how I got involved in this topic and issue. But it's obviously people have called upon me to speak as well on the subject, which I've started to do a lot now. And I was actually just in Exeter, New Hampshire, and spoke with Ralph Blumenthal and Peter Robbins at the Exeter UFO conference just a few weeks ago. And so it's hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Maybe this is an appropriate time, Travis, for you to sort of just walk through the night of November 5th, 1975. What can you, maybe in a shortened version, obviously you've probably said it 1,000 times, and my apologies, but there may be people are not familiar with your case on this thing. So I wonder if you could just go through it where you feel comfortable and describes enough of the story to give people a really good idea what you experienced.
Well, just a whole lot of blather amongst the work crew. We loaded up our truck and we're headed home. It'd gotten a little bit too dark to be continuing to work, or was going to be shortly. And as we headed out of there, we could see a glow coming through the trees, and couldn't quite, it was definitely out of place. There's, out in the forest, remote area like that, you don't expect light of any kind. But it was deer hunting season. We, heard hunters in the distance during the day. So thought maybe it could be hunters camped up there, but it was coming from higher than where ground level would be. Thought maybe it had been another fire. We'd seen that happen before, where lightning had caused a fire in a tree high up above the ground. So when we finally got past this dense thicket of trees to see the source of the light, there it was. It was just unmistakable. Mike apparently was too busy watching the obstacles in the road, big rocks and holes and stuff. And I yelled at him, Mike, stop the truck. Alan yelled out, "It's a UFO or flying saucer," or something like that. I mean, it was just unmistakable. It wasn't the dot of light off in the distance. And so Mike stopped. What are you guys seeing? And I threw open the door just as he skidded to a stop, thinking this thing would be gone in a flash. Typical, when we spot a wild animal, you can say, "Hey, look, there goes a deer," or "There goes a bear." And before the rest of the crew can even turn and be one of the ones that saw it, it's gone. So I got out and headed towards it. And right away, I began regretting that. And the crew was pretty alarmed at what I was doing and was yelling at me, whoa, come on, get back in the truck, let's get out of here. When I got fairly close to it, I could feel this sound. I say feel this sound because it was a combination of tones, really super high pitch and super low pitch. Some of them, frequencies that you kind of like feel in your body more than with your ears, and a really high pitched alternating tone that would sort of change if you change the position of your head, kind of like it would shut off if you weren't, didn't have your head pointed in the right direction. But it suddenly started to move and got louder, and the panic in my crewmates' voices added to the feeling that as soon as that movement started and it got louder, I just jumped for cover. And I got down behind a log there, and they were still screaming, let's go, let's go. And I didn't need to be told, but I was kind of torn between staying under cover there, hidden behind the log, and turning around and running away. And when I stood up, that was the point at which my head was the closest to the surface of this thing hovering above me. And I didn't see the blast of energy. I felt it. It was a tremendous shock. It's kind of like a physical blow, like I'd, been tackled in football, where it hit really hard when you didn't see it coming. At the same time, kind of like you touched a spark plug and got a heck of a jolt that way. But I was unconscious immediately. Crew described the blast of energy throwing me through the air and landing 15 or 20 feet back from where I stood up. They thought it killed me. And Steve said words to that effect, and started screaming at the boss to get them out of there. It's probably the best thing to do at that point. If you take their assumption that this was some kind of a weapon being fired. So they say they took off, went a considerable distance, and dang near wrecked the truck getting out of there, they said. And saw some deer hunters passing by and tried to catch up with them, see if they could get some people that were armed. Nobody had guns on the work crew. Couldn't catch up with the hunters. But in the movie, when Mike says, look, we got to go back, and the crew didn't want to go, that was true. But in the movie, they decided to go ahead and accept his offer to stand there alone in the dark and wait for him to go back by himself. That's not how it happened. They definitely wanted to stay together in the truck, and they went back with Mike. They said they found where the truck had spun out and taken off after they saw what happened, and called and searched, and unable to find me or my body, decided to go get help. So they went on into town and called the sheriff.
And part of that, obviously, that what you had said earlier regarding, I can only imagine myself in the same position. What they did would be a very normal type of response, obviously. And they've experienced
I
this
don't
thing.
feel like they abandoned me or betrayed me or that they were cowardly in any way. I mean, the smart thing to do was to get in the truck and get out of there. And I was the one that got myself hurt by acting foolhardy.
Yeah, no, I understand. So, and then 5 days later, you reappeared. Now, we'll get into the issues within the craft, and maybe there's some stuff that Jennifer can show us also. She's got some animation and stuff that we would like to run. But from your time on the ship and on the craft itself, do you recall what was going on in the craft? Did you ever come to where you realized that you're in some facility of some sort?
Slowly, when I first regained consciousness, I was in a great deal of pain. I didn't know where I was, but the memory came back to me of approaching and feeling the need to run away in fear, and thinking that I'd probably been injured as a consequence, that maybe the crew had taken me to the hospital.
Right.
My eyes were not focusing real good. I was really messed up. I felt like I was mortally wounded. Something was seriously wrong. There was a light above me. I was horizontal on a raised surface. I could tell because the ceiling was so close. When my eyes finally cleared, I could see these creatures standing over me. And I just got a shot of adrenaline that gave me the strength to push them away, pushed one of them away, and began trying to fight my way out of the room.
Is this a difficult thing still even today, Travis, to talk about? Or have you, because you've said it so many times or ran through it so many times, it's more second nature to you?
Well, I don't ever go there casually or on my own. So yeah, it's not anything I elect to do. I'm requested to go back there.
Right. I understand that. So, and then within, there have been, I think, even discussions where I've heard you say in an interview that you believe they were trying to help put you back together or heal you. What can you say about that from your
Well,
opinion?
I didn't think that at the time. At the time, my impression was this pain, this feeling of being mortally wounded, these creatures looking at me and with no expression, no reassurance of any kind, made me, sort of take on the standard interpretation of human contact with extraterrestrials. Hollywood has them as invading monsters. And so it took me a while to realize that being left in a place where I could get help had great significance. That I was returned at all, of course, is important, but that I was returned where I could get help.
Yeah, if they would have put you back where they found you or had discovered you.
Yeah, I'd have been out there in the cold and
right
and dark, and maybe not even been able to find my way back to town. But
sure. So you talk about creatures. How would you describe them? Because in our chat tonight, or in the number of people that are here, many have experienced different forms, everything from reptilian to mantis to grays to
I've heard
how would
of
you
a lot
describe
of
them?
different descriptions, but then there are so many of them that they call the grays, like they're all one group. Maybe not necessarily so. I mean, there could be a variety of groups that are very similar in appearance, and everybody thinks they're just one species. But
Would it be, as you recall at least, would what you had seen on the ship would have been sort of classified as grays?
yeah, I can't argue with that. But large, very large head, large eyes, no hair. Took me years to, speculating about what the reason for what happened, the reason they look the way they look. The very large eyes biologically speaking, usually coincides with animals on Earth that are either nocturnal or cave dwelling or something of that nature. So the low light levels inside that craft would support that theory.
Yeah, I could see that. So when you were brought back, you phoned a friend of your brother, I think, from a payphone?
My sister's house.
Oh, your sister's house.
Yeah. My brother-in-law answered the phone. And at first he didn't believe it was really me, thought it was a prank.
Right.
And I managed to persuade him it was me. And he said, okay, I'll get your mom and Dwayne and come and get you. Apparently I passed out at that point. When I woke up, they were just getting there to pick me up and put me in the truck.
Wow. So from an experiencer's perspective, how has this affected your life? I realize I'm talking about the glowing obvious, but the issue of, would you have, if you could have avoided this, would you, I guess you probably would have never had anything to do with this sort of thing, because a lot of the people, like guys like Jim Sparks, who have had traumatic experiences, end up supporting UFO or ETs in some of their endeavors by being spokesman for them. What's your take on that from your perspective on the personal side?
Well, like I said, it took me years to realize that they were probably trying to help, that the reason I was taken had to be because I was injured, and probably not due to anything intentional on their part. Discovering over the years that that area experiences the second highest frequency of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States. So if there was some sort of a secondary discharge that hit me, no kind of a weapon or beam being fired at me, something of that nature, or just the idea that a metallic object traveling at great speed through dry autumn air like that could have built up a charge that discharged through me just from getting too close.
Yes, that could very well be the answer to that. So when you've gone through this for, is it over 50 years now?
Well, it's getting close.
Getting close to 50 years.
Yeah.
When you start talking about how it affected your life, have you become closer to the situation? Obviously, because a lot of people want to talk to you about it, sort of thing. And have you had visits from extraterrestrials since that point?
Well, of course, I found out that trying to hide from it wasn't going to work. I just, laid low, didn't do any interviews, and for a length of time, I was just accused of hiding out. I had something to hide if I'm not out talking about it.
Yeah.
So as soon as I get out there and start doing interviews, then I'm a publicity seeker. So you can't win. And so I just resolved to try to make something good come of it and straighten out a lot of misconceptions, because there were rumors floating around that were just so far off the beam that were easily disproved if somebody would just look at the evidence.
Since we've announced that you were coming tonight, and Jennifer, I've had some people contact or send messages to us about how your experience has changed their life in a way where they are experiencers and allowed them to come out and actually speak up. So some of the positive things that have come from your experience has been one that has allowed this movement to grow in very significant ways. And people have come out. I suspect you've probably bumped into many of those type of people throughout your life. Would that be accurate?
I think that's true. I think that may be even part of the motivation on the part of the government to finally own up that there's something to this. it just wasn't working anymore to be claiming that the people making the reports were a bunch of lunatics, because it wasn't destroying their credibility, it was destroying the government's credibility. People, so they decided to admit that there was something to it, because it was just way too widespread of a conviction on the part of the public to sustain the only wackos see UFOs.
Yeah.
I come
Well,
up with a saying, believing that there could be life elsewhere in the universe doesn't make you a crackpot. Believing that we're totally alone in the universe is what makes you a crackpot.
the most commonsensical thing I've ever heard with regard on this topic, because you think about 1 billion stars out there, and that we're the only living creature. We were probably the most arrogant species in the entire universe, by the sounds of it, if we think that way. So that's an interesting take. So Jennifer, is there anything you think at this time that you want to introduce, have a clip or something that's part of the abduction, part of the animation that you put together for us, or put together for the movie, and then maybe you should play that.
It might be interesting, since Travis has just explained his onboard the craft experience. I have it's about a 4-minute clip, and it's literally just that. It's his onboard the craft experience when he wakes up on board the craft and he thinks he's in a hospital until the time he is, put back to sleep. It kind of explains what he experiences. So I will try to do a share screen and ask you if you can actually see what I see. I want to make sure I get the right thing up. So let's see. Give me a moment here to see.
You got it.
Yeah, the onboard the craft thing is black. Here it is. So I'm going to select that and hit share screen. And you should be able to see my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
It's all black.
It's a black screen right now.
Okay, so I'm just going to scrub it and make sure now you can see the movie.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go back and I'll hit play. Okay, there we go.
When I regained consciousness, I was in such pain that it would actually sort of knock me back out again. Pain. I knew something was terribly wrong with my body. I could move, but it was so difficult. But I felt I was probably safe in a hospital, that I was being taken care of. There was some sort of device across my chest. I had a lot of pain in my chest. I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I just took this to the doctors. Then when I looked in the direction of the movement sounds, I could see 30 forms that I thought were doctors wearing surgical caps and masks. So when I sharpened the focus in my eyes, I could see that was not the case. I was looking into the face of this creature. Then I knew I was in very great danger. And here his face was so close to me, another right behind him. The fear gave me the strength to raise my arm. It pushed the one that was standing close to me back, and he fell into the other one. I was rolling away from me, and this object across my chest fell off. I got on my feet and staggered back, and I bumped up against a shelf, and there was an array of instruments laying out there. I just glanced, grabbed the biggest thing I could find, and started flailing in their direction to keep them from coming any closer. That moment was the focus of my nightmares for months afterward. They stopped with their hands extended towards me and staring in a way that felt invasive and intrusive, like they were looking inside of me. It was horrible. I came to realize that it had to do with the stare, and the stare was them trying to reassert control, I think. Once it was apparent they weren't going to physically or even telepathically control me, they turned and left the room and went to the right. And so I went in the opposite direction that they had gone. Were they behind me? Were they pursuing me? Or was around this tight curve that I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead? Was I going to run into something worse? Adding to the panic was this feeling of suffocation, this feeling I was about to pass out from lack of air. I came to a doorway and looked in. I was fearful of the chair in the middle. It was a high back chair, and I was afraid there could be someone sitting in it. So when I moved to the side and could see that there was no one in it, then I moved towards the chair. And it was then that I realized that the closer I came to the center of the room, the walls, the floor, the ceiling were darkened except for points of light. It was a planetarium kind of a projection. My main concern was open these doors. I assumed that perhaps the buttons that were on the arm of this chair might open the door. That moved the star pattern. I was already unsteady on my feet. I turned and there was a man in the door. He had this glass helmet over his head. I started towards him, babbling questions and trying to tell him what these creatures were. He took me by the arm and was leading me out. We went through what I think was an airlock. You know, this door closed and that door opened and we went out. At this point, the craft we came out of was parked inside of this big hangar-like building, or it might have been part of a larger craft. He led me towards the vertical wall opposite this, through some doors, down a hallway into a room where there were some other people. They were very similar to him. A similar dress, similar coloring, light-colored hair, light-colored eyes. They're leading me, taking me by the arm and putting me over towards this table. I was in a weakened condition, but I felt their strength. But still, the panic I had at being restrained like that, I was able to jerk one hand free. And they put this mask over my face, and I got my finger under the edge of that, trying to pull it away. But before I could pull it away, boom, I was out.
So that's basically it. Whoops, sorry. Didn't mean to hit play again. So I'm going to do a stop share for now so you can hear me. And I'll just point out two interesting things I think should be noted there. One is what I'll call the proximity sensor. So he walks into this room that we called, for lack of better term, Travis named it in his book, like a navigation room on board this craft, trying to find his way out of this ship that he woke up on. And he walks into this room and he sees this chair, like an egg-shaped chair that you see. And he didn't know if anyone was sitting in it. And then when he got close to it, the room, the floor, the ceiling, the chair, everything became what looked like a planetarium, like a screen. And then as he walked back away from it, the stars receded. And then as he walked back towards it, it became a visual field, maybe like a flight navigation room. I thought that was a very interesting piece of technology. The other thing that's interesting is as he walks out of the craft with this being that he thinks is human, right? But it's probably not, he doesn't know. They walk down the ramp of the craft and they walk across what I would call a tarmac in a hangar of some sort where there are other craft parked. And hopefully you notice behind him, there are craft that look to me, as he described them in his book, like Tic Tacs. But this was 1975. This was practically almost 45 years before we heard about the very famous Tic Tacs and the Roosevelt and whatnot. So I'll just point out those two interesting things that drew my attention. And I'll also say that when we did this section of the film, we used some of the original drawings that Mike Rogers did as a guide to do a reenactment so people could really understand what happened while he was on board that craft. Because people say, well, you were gone for 5 days. Why do you only remember 15, 20 minutes or 2 hours? We don't know. We don't know how long that time is. Travis was waking up. He was going in and out of consciousness. He might have been dead, right? And they brought him back to life. We don't know. He might have been in a coma. But this is what he does remember of that period of time. And then he wakes up on the street outside of Heber. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you. That's probably the explanation that I was thinking as well when you approached there was a woman, Travis, you may have met her. She passed away 2 years ago. Pam Dupuy used to go to all the MUFON meetings, the UFO Congress, that type of thing. She flew craft, and I've had many discussions with her over the years. And it's quite remarkable, her description of things. how she flew craft. You know, she flew through thought. They actually grew some craft for her, part metallic, part biological, and she uses telepathy to fly the craft. Is how she described it. And one of the interesting things that comes from that is that she described craft that looked like orbs, let's say the size of a baseball or a little larger, maybe a grapefruit, that would come flying in and fly through the wall. And that when she went inside them, they were 2 or 3 football field big inside, even though it looked like something you could hold in one hand. I found that to be, I'm wondering if the craft that you were in, I guess the craft you saw was quite large, I presume. The one that struck you, or you got hit by the static charge or whatever that was that hit you.
Well, I wouldn't say it was 100 feet. It wasn't that huge. I would say it's been called the sport model. People nicknamed it. Just a smaller sort of exploratory utility extension of a larger craft. Now, whether the hangar-like room was part of a larger craft or a building somewhere, I couldn't tell. I couldn't see outside of it.
Right.
But as far as controlling anything telepathically, I kind of come to the conclusion that the feeling that I was getting from the stare they were giving me is that they were attempting telepathic communication or control, and it wasn't working. That this injury that I had sustained had scrambled my brain in a way that that wasn't a more conventional way of getting me under control. And one thing that comes out in support of that was the medical testing that went on afterwards. The first test, the very next day, was Dr. Candell put me into Barrows Neurological. It's a hospital. It's the same hospital that Muhammad Ali entered when he developed problems. He traveled to Arizona and did his testing on the electroencephalograph and the MRI equipment that I had was being tested on. But Dr. Candell knew better than to put me in under my own name. The panic and the hysteria in the media was just too great. So that also was advantageous in the sense that it was sort of a double blind for the technician. He had no expectation of finding something, but he did find something. He described a certain wave pattern that in a subsequent EEG disappeared, was not mentioned. So that could have been a residual effect of the injury that I had been experienced to the brain, and that continued to heal after I was returned.
Travis, as you so when you saw your doctor, like somebody who represented you, your own personal doctor, did you ever get any x-rays or things inside that show some form of healing or work to repair certain parts of your body? Has that ever been?
Well, that's what the EEG was. It was showing something going on inside my head, a brainwave scan.
Right.
And the two showed a difference over time. But I did have upper body x-rays, and there was a small spot in one lung that not there any longer, but it was just considered to be like a dust particle or something. The doctor called it a granuloma, whatever that was. It's not there anymore, but I had a whole battery of tests, heart, blood test, urine, the whole medical workup.
And you did well on those tests.
Yes. Yeah, and the significance of that is the accusation that this whole thing was a drug hallucination, that 7 people somehow had an identical hallucination.
Yeah.
No, it definitely was not. And the blood and urine samples were put through the county medical examiner's drug screen, showed no trace of any drug whatsoever.
I do get tired of people telling me what I saw. That's one thing that does bother me a bit on my own experiences. So, but I understand that they just can't accept it. I understand that. We have, Mitzi, do we have some questions maybe also to bring in at this point? Maybe some of the things that he's discussed. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we do. Let's see, I know there's at least 3. Some of the people haven't put them in caps, so Susan, well, let's see, somebody before Susan. Bruce asked, were there any bruises, cuts, or injuries when you were returned?
Well, there were no serious bruises in the sense that one UFO skeptic said that since the doctor didn't find bruises on me, that my body colliding with the hard rocky ground up there in the woods should have left bruises. Well, no, you know, it's a rough and tumble job, and we get bumped and stuff in the course of a day's work all the time and don't wind up with any bruises. But there was a tiny red mark inside my right elbow, but Dr. Candell said it was not over any major blood vessel. So if it was any sort of electronic terminal or anything like that, or just consequence of working in thorny brush the day before.
Okay. Susan asked, why do you think you were returned? Do you have any communication with them now?
Well, I used to have a real, I called it the anthill theory, you know, back right after it happened. And probably because it was the most comforting thought, you know, that they're really not that interested in us. And I just got myself into trouble by getting too close. That, you know, it's like a human being walking by an anthill and saying, you know, I think I'll stop and have a conversation with that little ant right there. You know, I thought it's preposterous that they'd have any individual interest in me. But as time went on, I took a much different perspective on it. And part of it had to do with learning that our own government has something called the Utah Data Center. You can look it up online. It's a gigantic computer in Utah, covers acres, takes millions of gallons of water just to cool those computers, and they're recording every electronic transmission on the face of the earth. So if mere humans can keep track of that much information, surely the aliens, who are far smarter than we are, keep track of individuals. That maybe if you saw one when you're 8 or 10 years old and you see one as an adult, they know it's you. I mean, we already know that individuals can be very positively identified by their DNA. Heck, even facial recognition, you know, the data involved in keeping track of individuals is not that complex. And for an extremely intelligent and advanced species, the idea that they would recognize individuals and keep track of them is not so far-fetched. Not that I feel special in any way. I'm sure there are thousands of people who've seen these things and they're keeping track of every one of them. But I don't think that sightings are an accident. You know, I always draw the picture of aliens slapping their forehead and going, "Ah, dang, hey, humans spot us again. We're going to have to be more careful next time." No, it's a measured amount of sighting that's deliberate and intentional. And I think there's probably a reason for it. One of them might just be to gradually accustom us to the fact that we're not alone. In a way that's not too shocking, not too exciting. Even our own government kind of tries to drop that bomb with as gently as possible. They release the information that they do let go of late on a Friday so that it dies down over the weekend. By the time Monday comes around, there's a whole new line of things to get people's attention so that it doesn't come off as too alarming.
Okay, we have
Absolutely.
a question. Thank you for your answer. When you started one of them in the book, when they left the room, what came back was a human-looking alien. I believe him, but I think they actually hypnotized him to think there was a human-looking aliens. In other words, I think they just put that thought to help calm him. So do you think that statement is true, Travis?
I think it's one of the likely theories. It could be a human-looking alien of all the probably multitude of species that are visiting Earth, that they could pick one that I would trust enough to where they could resume the medical treatment, medical corrections. And nobody else could do it. If I was just dropped off in front of an Earth hospital, I probably would have died. And they're the only ones who could fix it. And I wasn't cooperating with ones that looked too different from myself.
Okay, now someone, Vicky, kind of said the same thing. Could they have used people like robots? So that's another theory.
Well, that's another theory. If they were able to create some sort of a simulation, or even some sort of, I doubt if it was a telepathic type simulation to make themselves look more human, because that was the whole problem. I was fighting them instead of continuing the medical treatment.
Okay, another question with Bob. Travis, is your recall only from hypnotic regression?
There were little bits of memory that came back in dreams. I didn't know for sure if they were dreams or recovered memories from the time I was probably unconscious or dead during the 5 days.
Okay, there's another question. We have a lot of questions here for you, and I'm going to ask Betty to read half of them after I'm done. But this one is from Trish. I love the graphics of the bridge, the navigation center. That's an image I've never seen in the documentaries, but I've seen. So I wonder about the tall man, human or Nordic type. So I think that's more of a opinion, I think. I don't think it's a question. Do you believe, this one's from Veronica, do you believe in the story of Admiral Richard Byrd? And do you think that there was an advanced human being that are disguised themselves as ET?
Well, that's all speculation, and there's a multitude of possibilities, and probably all of them are amongst what's actually possible, but I can't know for sure.
Okay, my last question, and Betty's going to take over for me, is Rael Wilmont, was there any smell of sulfur that you recall?
No, I didn't recall any particular smell. It seemed stale and very heavy and humid, but my sense of smell is not so acute as it used to be. I don't know, could be a side effect of jobs I've held. I don't know.
The next question from Marie is asking, Travis, have you undergone any hypnotherapy to better understand why this happened to you and perhaps your connection to these beings?
I've undergone hypnosis one time. The chief accomplishment was to finally let me get control of the fear enough to relate what happened. Because up to that point, I hadn't even been able to tell my brother. Yeah, I was just so traumatized. And so just being able to get rid of enough of the fear to describe what happened was quite an accomplishment. I haven't.
Travis, how far after the event was that where you were able to talk to your brother? How long did it take?
It was within a few days. I don't know exactly. I know that the medical testing began the next day, but it might have been the day after that or the day after that. But it was pretty close. It was a part of the team put together by the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. 4 psychiatrists, 2 medical doctors, Dr. Harder, who performed the hypnosis.
The next question is, do you have any sense about the man you saw, the human man or tall Nordic blonde type? Any instincts about that? Impressions?
Well, at the time, I took it to be a rescuer, that someone was there to take me away from these horrible creatures that had done this painful thing to me. But that was just, I just didn't truly understand my situation.
And next question is, have you had any messages since then from them?
Well, I hesitate to report anything that isn't witnessed by multiple witnesses, you know.
No, this question is just simply asking your feelings and thoughts about if you had any messages, even if it's a good one, even if it's just good feelings about what you're going through now. Do you have any kind of response back from them or any kind of feeling that you're being
think
supported?
they've monitored the situation to a point where they were in a position to save a life.
Okay. That's wonderful. I mean, yes. And even through everything, having your life has at least allowed you to do something that you know, more stuff. The next question is, have you tried a channeler to communicate with them?
No, I haven't deliberately tried to communicate with them. I had a sighting of an object in a pretty dramatic situation. I guess I can talk about that one since there were other witnesses. Right after the new head of MUFON took charge, Jan Harzan spoke at Burbank MUFON. Also, Tracy Torme, who was a screenwriter on the movie Fire in the Sky, spoke there that night. I was headed home. There were 3 of us in the car when this giant black triangle came to us at a terrific rate of speed and stopped abruptly. I don't see how anything that huge could stop that quickly. Stopped right over the top of us, turned 90 degrees to its right, and then shot off in that direction. Impossibly large, but if it was piloted by extraterrestrials and not human American military or something, people theorize. I'm sure if we really had something that could perform like that, you couldn't keep that kind of thing a secret. But it was astonishing that it would stop right over the top of us.
Yes.
But my son says, Dad, should we pull over and take a picture? And I go, no, keep going. And then later I said, why in the hell did I do that? I needed a picture. I should have got the picture, but I was surprised at myself that I was that scared that late after the incident.
That's human nature, to be afraid of the unknown. nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
So
I
we
thought
save our
I'd come
skin
more
on
to
a billion
terms with
times.
it by then.
That saves us from the saber-tooth tigers and everything else just being a little afraid. So very, very real. And a couple questions in regards to any additional psychic or phenomena that you've experienced since your experience. Has something changed in that way?
Yeah, but you know, I try not to talk about stuff I can't prove because people just say it's just a claim. That thing with the giant black triangle, by the next morning, 15 other people who don't know each other independently reported that sighting. So I'm hoping one of them took a picture.
And then,
Travis, excuse me, Betty,
Yeah.
what concerns you about what other people think?
Just a reflection on Travis, the nut case.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've gotten over that as far as what they think of me. Who could care? But I have a family and I'd like for them to have some semblance of a decent life. And that kind of thing hanging over you all the time. So I just prove it, then tell about it.
Perfect answer. Betty, any more questions?
yeah, this one here regards to asking, is the tall man depicted in the film accurate to your memory, like taller than human blonde, or was that just a casting choice?
Yeah, I was fairly accurate.
Next question is from Seb. I'm interested in your personal shift in perspective regarding your spiritual religious beliefs from before your experience to now.
Well, that's pretty personal.
No, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. We're not here to talk about anything you don't want to talk about.
Well, I definitely believe in an all-powerful force in the universe. I doubt that this entity would create thousands of different religions here on the earth, and each one of them think that they're the ones who are on the straight and narrow, and everybody else is going to hell or run astray. And I think that's definitely a mistake. A creator, of course, would be much more universal than most people think, but that's just my opinion. That's all that matters.
No, your
Thank you.
opinion is very valuable to us. But yeah, we have lots of different faiths and lots of different types of people here in this group, and they're all welcome. And the next question is, do you have a higher than normal red blood cell count?
Yes, I do. I had some unusual health characteristics, and that's one of them.
And then next question is, are you aware of other cases where graves were working with human-like ETs?
I've heard that there are, but I don't study the field that much because I feel in order to answer questions about other people's experience, I owe it to them to do my homework, to get the facts, to study the case thoroughly, like was not done in my case. So in order to not repeat the wrong that was done to me, I don't comment on other people's case because I haven't had the time to research them thoroughly.
Next question here is, do you think there's a connection with the Phoenix Lights?
I definitely think that the Phoenix Lights was similar to the thing I saw in California. Giant black triangle, a light on each point of the triangle, and the ability to stop still in the air. It was not aerodynamic, so whatever was holding it up was not like an airplane of any sort.
Just one more question on this series. Do you get red blotchy skin on your face or white tattoos? Anything that's remained since?
Well, I have minor blemishes and things. I don't know if it has anything to do with my experience or not. I was
I think
very,
that's the question, is there any lasting marks from you?
I was very concerned about that. You know, am I going to come down with, I mean, the radiation that was detected at the site, the effects that were actually measurable in the trees there, led me to feel a great deal of concern about cancer or something of that nature. But nothing like that developed. As a way of handling my PTSD, was to work 12 hours a day, take no days off for like 20 years. And what would have worked anybody else into sickness, I never called in sick one time. So
Thank you for answering the questions. Some of them jump all over the place. So, but ready, Mark, for you to come back and
Yeah.
Continue on. Thank you very much again, Travis. Appreciate it.
Jennifer, I wonder if you can provide some information with regards to on-site, the location, with regards to the radiation and the growth that was going on in that area. You want to show something?
Yes, yeah, that's one of the major sections that we cover in the film, and it was covered in Travis's book, and I think it's really quite interesting. So if you bear with me, I will go hunting for this other little film clip on my desktop. Directionality, here it is. Okay, so what I'll do is I will do share screen. Let's see if I can find my Zoom screen again here. I will do share screen, and it's another dark one. Let's see if I can find it quick time. Here it is. Here it is. So just to make sure you are seeing it, I will scrub through it. Are you seeing the Ben
Yes.
Hansen with his arm up? Okay.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this is just a little clip from the film. It's been revised a few times. So this is like an earlier clip and a little conglomerate thing. Some things you don't actually see in the film when you watch it. But this is Ben Hansen and Travis Walton and myself and a couple others went back up to the site, and we did sort of a site survey. And this is kind of the evaluation of our site survey, because we knew there was some rapid tree growth and we wanted to try to document it and see if we could find any new data. And we actually did. We found a little bit, and this clip sort of explains it. So I will play it.
In the summer of 2014, we went back to the site to do a field survey. It's been so many years since the original incident that we really did not expect to find anything there. But while we were on the site, a discovery was made.
The calculations show that these trees were producing wood fiber at 30-something times the rate they had in the previous 85 years. Other trees exhibited the same kind of changes, and the effect diminished the farther you got from that spot.
Not only was there an extreme growth rate to some of these trees around the clearing, but it seems that there's also a directionality to them.
I started checking stumps at the four corners of the compass and discovered that there was a swelling and a thickening of the growth rings in the direction that the craft had been, and not on its opposite side. That was where the thickness of the rings were at the minimum.
Travis and some of the original people who did the first surveys had posited that possibly that the cell growth was caused by radiation. I took that a step further and did some digging to see if there's been any academic studies done on radiation and tree growth. And I found at least one or two related to the Chernobyl incident. A university out of Poland did a study in 1997 that found trees that were exposed to radiation after Chernobyl had grown up to 3 times in volume of accelerated growth as compared to previous years. Our field survey and finding this directionality and a possible connection to radiation opened a whole lot of new doors that need to be explored.
So that's just a short little clip. I will end the share screen so we can go back. So that's just a short little piece we shared. I have another one of Travis, but I don't know if we need that. That one kind of was, concise and complete. So I'll turn it back to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you. It's quite remarkable, Travis, when we sort of even just see the site. I was I was lucky enough to go to a dig in New Mexico one time with Wade. Oh, I'm trying to think of his last name. Wade. Anyways, he had invited me to a UFO dig in the plains of St. Augustine, where Gerald Anderson, at 6 years old in 1948, went there with his father and his uncle and his cousin. And he described to me in the middle of this flat 40-mile long plain with one outcropping in this whole area where the craft was sitting. He was standing there talking about ETs on the ground right at our feet where we were, and how when he went through that. And I just had that same feeling looking at that picture of you in the same spot. These are places where humans made contact with this other group of sense of, maybe different types of beings, maybe different dimensional beings, where we became more aware. You're on that sort of cutting edge of a new world that we actually exist in today because of that. It's quite remarkable just to see the spot. I had a real special feeling just looking at it and thinking that trees are growing. I wonder if they are as dense as the other trees, or they were less dense because they're growing so fast. There's so many interesting things about that whole thing. That's quite remarkable.
Well, we tried to get the Tree Ring Lab interested in following up on it, but they didn't seem so inclined, which is kind of unscientific.
Right. Well, I am.
But Jennifer's film is unique in that a lot of people were contacted and thoroughly interviewed that haven't really done much in the way of interviews anywhere. And I think the sheriff and a deputy were really finally willing to say things that they hadn't been willing to admit back at the time it happened.
Yeah, I'll add to that. We interviewed Marlon Gillespie and Chuck Ellison, both who were key, investigators of Travis's case. And in both cases, they were very, very forthright in what they shared. In fact, they both said to us after the interview, or while we were getting towards the end of it, they said, if you turn your camera off, Jennifer, we'll tell you about our own UFO sightings in both cases. And Marlon Gillespie told us about an incident, and Chuck told us about two that he had himself. And and Marlon also told us he had had his own sightings prior to Travis's event happening. So he did not discount what the boys were saying. I mean, personally, he didn't talk about it openly. People didn't know that he'd had sightings and experiences with craft, but other people had reported sightings in the area. He had been, on police calls that involved people reporting, and he had also had his own sightings himself.
They'd also done some cattle mutilation investigations.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We just didn't have time to go into that in the film, and we didn't have their permission to talk about their own experiences in the film. That wasn't what we were there to interview them on. But they also didn't say you can't ever tell anyone. And Marlon Gillespie's no longer with us. So I think it's okay. I mean, we're really honoring Marlon when we share that story. So,
And Cy Gilson also has passed away. So it's quite fortunate that you were able to get both of them on film expressing confidence in what they had discovered in their investigation.
right. And Cy Gilson, who Travis just mentioned, was the polygraph examiner. Rarely in a UFO case do you get to involve anyone. Rarely there's more than one person. So in this case, in Travis's case, there were 7 people, Travis and the 6 other loggers. And because Travis was missing and the boys were suspected of murdering him, the police chief, the sheriff, Marlon Gillespie, brought in the Arizona State polygraph expert at the time, who was Cy Gilson. So this was a very expensive thing to do. You never get this in UFO cases. And of course, basically all the boys passed the test, not initially. One was inconclusive at the time, but he retook the test later. And then when Travis was returned, he took multiple polygraph tests about what he experienced and what he saw. So there's a lot of reason to believe that there's a huge amount of evidence that sort of backs up behind this case that just continues to stand the test of time.
Travis, for people in our group here that, and for people who watch this after, what advice could you give an experiencer from you being one of the most publicized experiencers? Is there any advice that you could offer to these people with regards to how you think they maybe should be dealing with it from that perspective?
Well,
Just
I
some plain
can't
advice.
advise them whether to report it or not. That's a personal decision, and they have to weigh the effects on themselves, their careers, and that of their loved ones. But once they resolve to report it, I say, stick to your guns. Don't let them cause you to back off or tell them what they want to hear or any of that sort of thing. Just stand your ground.
Yeah, I think there's millions of people that have experienced different forms of this kind of genre affecting their lives, and you've had a tremendous effect on your life, and including your friends and people, your workmates that you work with, have all really been affected maybe for their entire adult lives from that perspective, from this particular event. And the good things that have come from it, or the things we've talked a little bit about tonight, the idea of a lot of people have awoken. I know there are people involved watching right now that have awoken and that came forward because of I call it the bravery of presenting the facts as you knew them. And I think this is your experience. It's like I said earlier, I don't like someone telling me what I saw, because it's irrelevant. It's my experience, is whatever I'm dealing with, trying to tell somebody and explain it out. And I think it's just something, a very interesting thing about this genre that we're all sort of experiencing together. There's no reason, and when you look at the people who are here tonight, there's a reason why we're all here. This doesn't happen by chance, as I take it. We call this a community that we put on a monthly show, but we're very much a community, and there are lots of people in here we know and we see. It's like meeting an old friend again every time we see it. And to have you, and I think of Jennifer spending 3 years of her life documenting the truth of your experience, is something very significant. Someone gives up three years of their life to actually tell the true story. And for you, Travis, to stick with it, to stay with what your positions have been, and to bring that forward.
And other people in the position that the sheriff was, and the polygraph examiner, and other people to the very end. Two of my crewmates have passed away, and they have stood by what we experienced to the very end.
In Phoenix, two of your mates that you were with that day showed up at the conference, and I went over and talked to them for a few minutes. They really are a big part of this story, really, at the same time. They went through some traumatic experience just like you did, and they were probably more in a conscious state to recognize what was going on at the point, until you were probably hit by static electricity or some form of thing that I can't imagine them trying to harm you. Why step on an ant pile when you're a human? Like, as you've talked about the connection to ants and humans, I've always wondered that myself.
Yeah.
Anyways, any other questions that people have sort of put in here? Betty?
No more questions. But other than wanting to know how to get hold of the film or how to see it.
That's a good thing.
If Jennifer could talk about that. Maybe you got a website you can put up for us and things like that.
Yep, there is a website. It's called Travis Walton themovie.com. Sorry, I just had a brain fog there for a moment. Travis Walton themovie.com. You can go there. You can actually, from right there, you can click on it. If you have Amazon Prime, which many people do, they can watch it for free. It's up on Amazon Prime, and it's up with multiple languages. So there's now a menu available on both the DVD we sell, but even when you go to Amazon Prime, so you can watch it with English subtitles. So if you're hard of hearing, you can see the subtitles at the bottom if you click on.
Yeah, in more than one language.
And right.
Yes, in multiple languages.
Also, yeah, it's in Spanish, in Portuguese, in French, in Japanese, and I think that's it for now. We do have it translated in Greek, but we haven't put that out yet in on the DVD format. I have to have it reviewed. Someone did it for me in Greek, so we'll make use of that. But so it's really traveling around the world now. People can see it wherever they want to. And it's on many other streaming platforms now too. I'm told. I used a film distributor called Film Hub. So I think it's up on Hulu and Tubi and Crackle, and I don't remember all of them. I'm sorry, but there is like 25 or 30 streaming channels that are now carrying it. So it's great. And this is like the first time I've actually ever like made back like any funds on the film. It'll still probably be another 10 years or so before I break even, financially as a filmmaker. But I'm grateful that it's getting out there and people are seeing it.
Yeah, I was in Brazil a week ago, and they speak Portuguese there. And so that's for the first time, it was driven home to me that, yes, there is a Portuguese portion on the disc already.
Did they show the film?
No, but I was able to point that out to hundreds of people. Great.
Well, I purchased the movie, as I told you, and it's very worthwhile. I mean, I like it actually much better than the movie because I know I'm getting the truth of, obviously the fiction of the world likes to blow things out of proportion, but to hear it from the people that experienced it is very well worth the time. And it's not even that expensive. I think mine was $7 or something like that to buy the film. So it very economical as well. So I advise people to do that.
We did interview all the living crew members, and we tried to feature each of them and share the story from their perspective as well, intertwining that with Travis's story. And that it does move pretty quickly. I think it has some nice closure, bringing the guys from the crew individually back up to the forest with Travis. So there's a lot of on location parts filmed. I think
the Travis film includes a lot of things that just haven't been picked up by a whole lot of the documentaries and news reports that have been done in the past. It's a lot more complete than you might have encountered in the past.
Well, does anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, we have a couple more here.
Okay.
The first one is, has there ever been any discussion about releasing Fire in the Sky with an updated abduction scene?
Yeah, well, we're working on, but that's a theatrical movie. That's fiction. The important thing are good, solid documentaries that are trying to stick to the facts. But this new Hollywood type film, I will prevail upon them to stick closer to the real story, though. But don't ever look to a Hollywood movie for the facts that you would find in a documentary.
And now the next question is, how do you feel about the global movement to push for disclosure regarding UFOs and UAPs? How was your experience in the Brazilian conference?
Well, I think the popular sentiment is for our official agencies to acknowledge the uniqueness of this phenomenon, and that's succeeding. It's coming forward, and I like to think that this case, sticking to our guns and standing by what happened to the end, has contributed to the willingness of the government to concede, yes, there are things we see that aren't ours that we can't explain.
And Ricky here said he was very impressed by your controlled, conservative manner. Jennifer, and with excellent questions from Mark as well. And thanks everyone for putting things together. Then Tobias asks, Travis, are there any other blood anomalies that you can tie back to this event besides the greater blood count?
Oh, typo stuff, but you know, that nothing you can prove to be uniquely less
Related to your UFO experience? Basically. Not related. Okay, no problem. Next one here is, this is a little long. Susan, I want Travis to know that I had known about his UFO experience from the time it happened. I have had my own minimal experience in this regard in the late 1950s. And then when someone in Manitoba had his touch with the UFO, she's talking about our own Grant Cameron, who touched the UFO in his, when he was in university in the 1970s. And she'd really appreciate hearing about your encounter. She really appreciates hearing about your encounter and admires the fact that you still have an effort to share your experience, as you recall it. And thank you very much for the service you're doing and enlightening others.
Well, the appreciation helps because sometimes I I get the feeling that, what am I doing? You know,
Oh, and I made a mistake.
other things I can do with my life.
I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It wasn't Grant Cameron the lady was talking about. It's actually a man named Stan Mikachuk as well too from Manitoba. So we have quite a number of experiences in Manitoba that you know, among ourselves we know about, but aren't exactly documented totally with everybody else, like our lovely Mark Olson and his experience.
Mhm.
And that's
It's-
it so far with questions.
Yeah, Travis, it is something, I mean, when I go to the UFO Congress, I had, you know, I enjoy the speakers, but I think the greatest part of the whole event is meeting other experiencers and having and sharing each other's experiences. A lot of times between the speakers, I would go outside, we'd have a coffee, sit around talking with people saying, so why are you here? And I would hear the most interesting stories. You know, as interesting as any of the speakers that would get up on the stage, and sharing your message is something that I think needs to be done. Number one. Number two is I think it adds value to other people's lives, especially they're there for particular reasons. There's a reason why they come to a UFO Congress. It's not because you know, they had nothing to do that day. A lot of these people travel from all over the world. I knew there are people from Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Canada, all sorts of them from Canada. So it's an amazing, it's one of the most interesting topics unknown to the masses at this point. But obviously that's changing because of, I think one of the ladies put it in here that we are the disclosure. We are the people that are doing the disclosing and leading the charge when other people tell us we saw static electricity or we saw some swamp gas or whatever the case may be. I mean, it gets quite humorous at times, and I thank you for your effort because you have sacrificed a lot of your life to bring this forward.
That's one thing that has been rewarding to me is to help people, to reassure them of the reality of, you know, it's only natural. I did a lot of reality testing in the aftermath of my experience. So, you know, all these things being thrown at me that earthquake lights caused temporary insanity in me. But wait a minute, did the earthquake lights make 7 people hallucinate identically? You know, you gotta, what would I do if I was alone, you know, without other witnesses who experience exactly what I did, you know? To have it, you know, confirmed for you really helps. And you're constantly being told you were hallucinating or something, you know. It was all a dream.
Yeah, with all those people around and reappearing 5 days later. I mean, the whole thing is just quite hilarious when you hear people talk about that, how ridiculous their ideas are.
Well, people are so fearful that they're desperate to explain it away any way they can, you know.
No
They-
question.
no matter how far-fetched their explanation is, it's easier for them to accept that than the idea that, you know, there's a universe here with literally trillions of other planets, and many of them far older civilizations than ours.
Right. Jennifer, do you have anything you want to add or show as a part of this presentation?
I think we hit the best pieces, you know, the onboard the craft and the rapid tree ring growth as the terms of the video clips that I'd kind of made short little segments for basically I did that for Travis so he can use them in his PowerPoints when he goes out and presents. So I don't think I have anything really critically important in relation to the Travis story to add. But I will tell people if I can give another plug for an interesting thing to do. There is another sort of UFO mysteries cruise coming up. Travis and I did one of these in 2019, which was really a lot of fun. A friend of mine named Susan Shumsky is running a cruise with Holland America or Royal Caribbean. I think it's Royal Caribbean.
I think it's Royal Caribbean. I saw it on your website.
Did I put it up on the website? Okay, so
Yes.
that's on the On Wings Productions website, so people can go there. That's On Wings, ONWINGES Productions.com. And that's a wonderful way for people like your audience to be able to travel with interesting experts. So there'll be a lot of people discussing ancient artifacts and ancient civilizations on this hidden secrets tour. We'll meet in California, I think April 7th, and it goes down the Mayan Riviera, or I'm sorry, not the Mayan Riviera.
Mexican Riviera.
Mexican, that's called the Mexican Riviera. So it's the Pacific coast of Mexico. We'll stop in 4 different cities, but we'll have lectures during the day when we're cruising, like 3 out of the 5 or 6, 7 days of the cruise, 3 full days are conferences. So you can go and hear lectures when you're at sea. And then every night when you have dinner, you can sit with a group of people who are from the conference and you can have these long in-depth conversations. So if you were going to go, say, just to a conference and try to set that up yourself, it becomes expensive and complicated. You have to know, meet the speakers, and here you're all sitting to dinner, at dinner on a cruise every night. And it's really a great way to kind of sort of decompress, get deeper stories, from people, have personal connections, and really build bonds and relationships that last for decades. So I really promote the opportunity to your audience to consider that. So there's one coming up in not too long. And
When do you have the dates?
Yes,
By any chance?
I do. It's April 7th to the 14th. So I think
Right.
it's the second full week of April. So it should
I'm
be a
not
very
sure how to tell people how to get a hold of my book, Fire in the Sky. I think it's traviswalton.com, but
yes, it is, Travis.
Okay.
If they go to your website,
Walton.com.
they can buy- yes,
I-
traviswalton.com, they can buy both the book and they can buy my film there too.
the
Travis
Travis
Self.
Wonderful.
yes.
Great.
I have
Well,
it on our event page if people want to see it.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mitzi. You also put it up on the event page.
That's a good idea.
Great.
Yeah, the cruise would be fantastic. What I got out of the UFO Congress were lifelong friendships, people of like minds getting together, sharing very interesting, some of the most interesting topics and stories that I've ever heard in my entire lifetime. I can't say enough about it because I'm not sure if you've ever met Mark Leone before, either of you.
I know Mark.
He's been on our show, and he's just a fascinating guy. We've had great times together. But that came from going to these type of congresses and types of events. I think they're just incredibly valuable. I think they're fun to be on, and I think you can learn a great deal. and establish friendships with people that last a lifetime. I think
Yeah,
it's well
I've
worth
done
the time.
that Mexican cruise, Mexican Riviera cruise before. It was really neat. Look out the window and see dolphins jumping out of the surf.
Yes,
Yeah.
Travis and I did the last cruise together. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, well, I should say we were both speakers on the cruise. We were not, you know, and so and there were many other speakers too. It was really quite wonderful. So I highly recommend it.
Well, listen, I would like to say, in respecting your time, and I know Jennifer, you and your friend are traveling
We are
out to
driving
Phoenix
across the country.
in a
Yes.
very interesting way. But
Yeah.
I'd like to say thank you from all our people who spend 3 years of your life to put this thing together. That is well worth your time to actually watch. I really appreciate it. What can you say to somebody who puts that kind of dedication into something for that length of their life? That's just fantastic. Travis, I know you get part of lots of invites to go to a lot of these kind of events, and we are a group, a community of experiencers, and to hear you come in is enlightening for us. It does something special for us that we regenerate our excitement over what we've experienced. Some of them may have started in a very difficult, frustrating, scary way, and a lot of them have migrated into an epiphany moment in our lifestyles. My life has changed dramatically since I've, had my experiences, and I look at it and I say it's just a fantastic part of my life. And all I can say is from me, and I suspect from everyone here, thank you for taking the time out of your life to come here away from your family to sit and talk to us about your experiences, which you may have told 500 times already. And
Well,
I think
people
that's
do say, why are you still doing this? And I say, I can't get away from it. So the best I can hope is to make something good come of it.
let's hope the next time we meet, we all buy Travis Walton and Jennifer Stein a lunch or a dinner the next time we're together, and we can have some exciting and interesting talks. We thank you both for coming and showing up tonight and being a part of our event here, and we very much appreciate it. And we hope sometime we can have you back. And
There is a question from Carol.
okay,
Oh,
what is it?
thank you, Jennifer. It's good to see
By the
you.
way, there's a number of
Mark.
people saying thank you to both you and Jennifer, Travis, on our chat
Mark.
sites. So what
Well,
did
thank
you
you
say,
all
Betty?
for
My
listening.
apologies.
Mark, it's good to see you. Jennifer, it's good to see you. Travis, it's good to see you again. I've met you a couple of times here in Toronto. The Alien Cosmic Expo with Richard Dolan, and when we were at the studio. One quick question, Travis. This Winnipeg Experiences group was started by Grant Cameron. He's our Canadian guy, a Canadian historian, and he was into presidential material. And he said, it's not about UFOs, it's about humans going to higher levels of consciousness. Do you agree with that, Travis?
Yes, and I think that's accounts for the reluctance of the extraterrestrials not to initiate more open contact, is that we need a worldwide elevation of consciousness to be ready for such a thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Travis.
That's a good question,
Thank
Carol.
you. Thank you.
Well, again,
Yeah, I would second that. And I think that that's really what Grant has really been focused on, that it's all about consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's shifting that consciousness forward to, maybe you'd call it galactic consciousness, cosmic consciousness, but, consciousness that, there's probably intelligent life elsewhere, and we may very well contact and connect with that intelligent life. And what is that going to look like? And on whose terms will that be? I often mention to people that Penn State University in Pennsylvania is the first university that I know of that ever did a 5-year interdisciplinary study on what that contact will look like and what sorts of things we should consider in terms of whether it's, psychological or financial, or in terms of, natural resources on the planet, or political or legal or psychological. They did a very in-depth study. Now they have announced they are opening their coffers to create a $10 million grant, of which they've raised 3, to create an endowed chair and an endowed college for the study of extraterrestrial contact. I mean, that's huge.
That is.
Yeah, at last.
It's really taking our consciousness forward and looking at what we need to embrace in terms of, education, right? How are we going to have people who will help us deal with that? I think that the government or secret groups have been doing that for many years, but to actually have a university come forward and endow a chair for UFO studies is huge. And that's beginning to happen.
Well, I think the powers that be need to realize that these beings are observing us, and they see us, they know us better than we know ourselves. And to realize that we're kind of embarrassing ourselves in front of them. We look at it from their point of view. We probably come off as a bunch of savages from one end to the other, whether you're living in a mud hut somewhere or in some highfalutin laboratory. Relative to them, we're all a bunch of savages. We really need some serious elevation.
That is for sure. Anyway, anyone else have a comment they want to make? Having heard none, I would love to again say thank you again. In respect of you taking your time, Jennifer, you're traveling and made your time to stop, and so you could join us. And Travis, thank you very much for spending the time with us again, away from your family, as I said, and to provide us with some wonderful knowledge, feedback, fill in the blanks in some of your story that we maybe didn't understand before, and hopefully people purchase the movie that you can learn from the people who are actually directly involved with it as well. I think that's something that's all well and good. And we appreciate all your time, and hopefully you get some book sales, some movie sales out of this to back up your efforts and how you put forward the message to everyone else here in this community. And I know you're not going to get rich over it. It's just, it's something that it's a little thing we can return.
Well, the way it is now, they have to find me.
Yeah.
So many people say, well, we're so relieved to find you. I'm finding used copies for ridiculous prices, but
yeah,
they had to search to find it. But
that's a funny thing, because the resale books sometimes are more expensive than the brand new ones.
Yeah.
And Travis, would you sign books on somebody purchases them, or would you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great.
And there's
that's a nice thing.
They can specify if they want to have me endorse it to their father or son or whoever, and happy birthday or whatever,
Wonderful. That's great.
He was showing that, or Carol was showing that she has a copy.
Ah, wonderful, Carol. Great.
That was from Jennifer. That was from Jennifer when I think we met the first time.
Yes.
Travis,
So you have, Carol, I'll mention, you have a collector's item. The footage that was in the first film, we no longer sell the first film that we came out with in 2015 because we had a rights issue with some footage. We negotiated and paid for rights from a producer named Brandon Chase, who then never really fully gave us the rights. He never signed a contract. So basically, I either had to sue him or buy footage from someone else. So it was just cheaper to go looking for archive footage from someone else. So that's a collector's item. So people who have the original film.
Wow, thank you.
I see Ron Thomas also has one of your DVDs as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah.
So,
and it was autographed at the UFO Congress.
Right.
In 2017, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So,
thank you, Travis.
I
Yeah.
guess those films have all doubled in price since we don't sell them anymore, so.
Well, I'm not selling mine.
No, it's not going anywhere.
All right, well, I'll say good night and thank you, Mark.
We thank both of
Night
you.
all.
I
Thanks
thank
for-
everyone for coming in, and Travis, sorry, you can have the last word.
I say thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate the good reception, the warm reception with you all.
Appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks all for our
Okay,
group
thanks
that
all.
put this together. Betty, Mitzi, Laura, thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.